Greetings and welcome to the Quantum Ogre Cast, the topical TTRPG podcast you were destined to encounter no matter what choices you made. I am your elder goblin host, Jorbin, and I am joined today by a sensible Ogier guest, Ryan.
Hey,
What's going on, Ryan?
hey, thanks for having me. I'm just excited to talk about whatever you want to talk about. That's what I'm here to do.
Well, we'll probably talk about a lot of things. We're going to meander a bit, and we'll try to get to our topic of the day, which is incentives, boons, carrots on sticks, a little bit of information sitting behind the screen, that sort of stuff.
Love it. Can't wait.
Cool. Well, I like to start things off with a little rapid fire round of your real life character sheet. Not a character you've played, but the real Ryan character sheet.
Sure.
And so the way I'm going to do it is I just keep throwing them at you. Don't think too hard about these, just whatever pops in your head.
Okay.
All right, ready?
Yep.
Number 1, alignment.
A chaotic good.
Yeah, good. Okay. That one hasn't been said yet, so.
Okay.
All right, here's sort of a curveball. Non-human ancestry that you relate most to.
Non-human ancestry that I most relate to. It would have to be halfling.
Halfling. Oh, it's so funny. That's one that's popular right now.
Yeah.
Okay. You're in a dungeon. A monster chases you into a room. You see a weapon rack. What do you grab?
I'm going to grab anything shiny, anything that has like a gem or a jewel, because maybe I'm lucky and it'll cast magic when I use it.
Ah, cursed blade. Too bad. All right.
I'll take
So,
it.
highest attribute.
Oh, well, not the one that I want, but the one that I
Don't be humble.
whatever. What do you attach patience to? I'm overly patient. Is that a wisdom thing?
That feels like wisdom.
That could be wisdom, so that's probably that.
I think what I know of you, that feels right.
Yeah, to a fault. To a fault.
All right. Dump stat.
Strength.
Oh, man. Yeah. Mine's either strength or con, so I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
All right. This is a weird one. Get ready. You're going to build a D&D superhero based on the aesthetic of a monster. What do they look like?
I think I think I would go with many armed, um, a tentacled like an octopus. I'm thinking of like a displacer beast.
Mm.
Highly high dexterity, just multi threat. That's what I imagine.
So, like, he casts out a bunch of, like, images of where he might be, and then, uses his tentacles to bite everybody.
Yeah, and
I dig
also
it. Yeah.
completely covered in fur like a Catman. Yes.
You're like a cooler Black Panther, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
If we can steal that one.
Why not?
I don't have the rights to any of the Marvel stuff, but I think that's fine.
We can work on that.
Or D&D for that matter. Okay, last one. You're at Fantasy Starbucks. What's your coffee order?
There must be something on the fantasy menu that is even blacker, even more effective than just black coffee. I want that. I want the tar. I want the really effective stuff that they're like, maybe they'll only serve to dwarves. Give me that. That's the coffee I want. I want to stay.
You
up.
want the black magic coffee.
I want to stay up for the next 4 days.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You can't go to sleep even if you wanted.
Yeah. That would be perfect. Yeah, I'll take that.
Nice. Cool. Well, that's our little lightning round. And then, we'll just dig into a topic here. So here we go.
I feel like podcasts are great for helping people actually to chat. I feel like it's like, man, why don't we just do calls more often and just casually chat? It's like, man, what would we do without podcasts? This helps so many people out. Yeah.
Well, if you're not monetizing every inch of your life, what are you doing?
Exactly. You're doing something wrong. That's what you're doing. That's what I say.
Man. Well, I always like to ask, like, what games have you been jamming on lately? Like, just 5e or branching out or anything? Or
Well, 5e is definitely my sort of bread and butter. The 2 games that I run every week, and have been for years, are both 5e games. But my interest is definitely peaked in I guess other systems. My one of my two games is likely to be wrapping up here before long, which for me before long is like in the next 6 months or so, right? So it's with that on the way, my plan is to sort of leave that night or that gap in my week open so that I can start running shorter runs of other games. So 5e is what I know the most. Games that I'm really curious about and have dug the most into beyond that, Blades in the Dark.
Oh
I'm really
man,
curious
I love
about
Blades.
Shadow Dark. Really curious about Call of Cthulhu. So I've got my shelf is full of
Yeah,
these different games that I want to try out that I just haven't really had the chance to.
yeah, for sure. Now I played like exactly 2 sessions of Blades in the Dark, and I love it. It's
Yeah.
one of those games that like it just really conceptually it ticks a lot of boxes for me,
Hmm.
but I haven't found the right group to play it with. So yeah, yeah. Actually, I was looking at your profile here on Discord, and it says you run 2 to 3 games each week. Is that still accurate?
Yeah, it's definitely more so two lately. So it was three there for a little while, and then one of the three games kind of merged into another, which was okay because two I like because it means that even with scheduling conflicts, I'm likely running every week, which
Yeah,
is what I like. Three was mostly a question of like, let me see if I can stretch myself. Can I do this? Can I run, three different, very different games every week? And I could, but man, it's a lot of time. So
yeah. That's just a lot of prep in general.
yeah, especially when it's not, like I said, not the same or there's no duplication or crossover, and
Right.
it's all homebrew, custom every time. Yeah, it definitely adds up.
Yeah, and you're still doing streams like every day almost, right?
That's the goal. Yeah,
Yeah.
except
Wow,
for
that's crazy.
nights where I just fall asleep.
Man, that's crazy. That's a lot of D&D.
It is, yeah, yeah. Well, to some extent, feel like I've been playing catch up since I really sort of fell hard into the hobby because I didn't ever play it until I was already in my 30s. So I'm
Right.
trying to, close the gap. There's a lot of people that with a lot of experience and trying to catch up a little bit.
Now I feel that I'm kind of in the same boat. Like I probably started really getting into the hobby in my mid to late 20s.
Hmm.
And yeah, I hit the ground running with like organized play doing like Pathfinder Society stuff. And I used to back then when I was just a single dude, not a family man or anything, and
Right.
I'd probably play like at least 2 games a week.
Hmm.
As often as the store was like doing
Yeah.
organized play, I was there rolling dice.
Yeah. It
But yeah,
changes things a bit once you got, there's stuff going on. I mean, I know my wife and I used to play a lot. We kind of found our way to the hobby through board games and
yeah,
used to play a lot of different stuff and both just the two of us and hosting groups. And now it's like, okay, D&D is our game, and this is what we'll do, but not a whole lot of time for much else. Not a whole lot of free time with kids and stuff.
yeah, no, for sure. I feel that. So, you mentioned Shadow Dark, you mentioned Blades in the Dark.
Mhm.
There was a third one, right? You said
Yeah, Call of Cthulhu.
Call of Cthulhu. That's one I have not touched at all.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
find it really interesting. I like the D100 roll under system,
Mhm.
just because like mathematically, that makes total sense to my brain. It's
Yeah.
one for one. So
Yeah, I find that I gravitate more toward the kind of broad, vibesy type of games. The thing that, like, each of these games that I've sort of picked up so far kind of hits on a tone that
mm,
interests me. And Call of Cthulhu, like, I love Lovecraftian horror. That was one of the first ones that I knew I wanted to try. Once I kind of break out of the 5e mold a little bit.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and every game does have like a slightly different vibe, especially one as colored as Call of Cthulhu. I mean,
Hmm.
you know, from my understanding, having not played it, most games end with either like characters dying or going mad or some other terrible fate. It was
Right.
very, very different than like your 5e kind of games.
Yeah. I think the one of the games that was sort of a, I don't know, along the dotted path that led to Dungeons and Dragons for my wife and I was a game called Mansions of Madness, which is a board game.
Oh yeah.
One of those big crazy ones that we it's in a second edition now. There's actually an app that sort of makes running it easier, but we started playing it before that, when it was just it's so complex, so rules heavy, you know, but evokes similar sort of feelings to a Lovecraft inspired, or very just squarely in. It's basically all the Lovecraft stuff in a sort of one shot D&D type of setting. And yeah, you do kind of have to step back at different points and go, okay, so I know we just, if we break down this round and what just happened, you know, you went into that shed, saw something, lost your mind, ran out of it, and the whole thing burst into flames. Like, you have to kind of break down the game and the story, and like, this is kind of darkly comedic in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Betrayal at House on the Hill. Like if you've ever
Mm-hmm.
played that game, it's got, at the end you're busting open the book, and usually everybody kind of turns on each other, and some crazy scenario happens. It's kind of horror themed, but maybe even like a little bit eldritch as well.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely.
So, you knew I was going to ask you this question. You knew it was coming.
Can't
Ryan,
wait.
how do you feel about stairs?
I it's deep personal feelings, intimate feelings about them. Uh,
Well, for those, I'll
yeah,
just
go
say
ahead.
for
Yeah,
those who don't know, you've been making stairs on your channel, like doing crafting for like what, 3 months now?
yeah. Speaking of eldritch horrors, it is it has been crafting for all time. Yeah, I think I was running D&D for about a year to a year and a half before I really got into crafting, and I before that I've never crafted or made anything in my entire life. I've never had any interest in it. I've never,
Yeah.
I maybe painted a couple miniatures for a board game. But the idea of sort of making things to enable gameplay is really exciting. That's really what's behind the staircase craze, is that I've got a bunch of vertical gameplay ideas that I'm
Yeah.
exploring. But
No, it's really cool actually. I jest, but like the
yeah.
first time that I really tuned into your channel and you were making those stairs and then you did like the side shot,
Hmm.
and I think there was like a slime trap running down them or something,
Oh
and then
yeah.
you slotted in something else and then a mini, and honestly, like it kind of just blew my mind watching it in real time. I was like, I
Oh,
could
thank you.
see the possibilities, and it's such a cool, unique kind of a set piece that I've not really seen done anywhere else.
Yeah, it's well, thanks. And it's I really need to do more playtesting. People expect that I use this kind of stuff in my games every week, and I really don't. I obviously have a lot of terrain to pull from, but there's sort of two different efforts, because like planning and running my own game all the time is usually divorced from kind of these big kind of crafty ideas that I have on the channel, because I mean, like you just said, it's taken me a couple of months to really figure out this modular staircase idea. It's like, well, if that was for a game that I was
Yeah,
running, that changes every week. I'd never have it done in time.
right. Yeah.
But I think it's coming to a final. It's coming to a point where I can consider it all done, which is exciting too. On to the next thing.
Well, and then, I've been kind of watching the progress that's unfolded on your live streams, and you started to do those. You're like working towards that module that really focuses on the stairs that you've been building.
Hmm.
Which,
Yeah, I was
yeah,
kind of breaking it down a little bit the other night. I think it's actually going to be probably three. And the funny part is that uh, what I what I find really exciting about crafting for D&D, and this is crafting, could be terrain, it could be props. Um, everybody's every DM, I think, to an extent is a crafter already, because almost everybody's written down something on a piece of paper, or kind of made something, in Photoshop, or found an image online and sort of done something to kind of make the game come to life a little bit more.
Yeah,
And
sure.
that sort of back and forth process of sort of having ideas for a game, and then making something, and then that thing you made make you go, "Ooh, I want to go add this to my plan for the game." And that back and forth process, I think, is really, really fun, really, well, clearly addicting for me. I can't help myself. But yeah, it's a unique sort of game design experience that feels like what I must imagine it feels like to sort of program, like digitally make a game for
Mm.
people, but like it's doing it physically to some extent.
Yeah, and you touched on something that, is really true no matter what game you're playing. Like, there's something innate, I feel like, in game masters that we really want to take the rules and tinker with them a bit and, like, really get into that designer brain, or that, like, kind of engineer mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, it's funny. I was watching, like, there was a YouTube series with a bunch of the original designers from, like, every era of D&D.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was funny because they were saying, like, especially the earlier guys, like, I want to say like zeroth or first edition or something, but they're like, one of the first things you do whenever you come to a new table is you go, okay, what are your table rules? Like, what's
Yes.
different here, basically. And then that was like the opening conversation before you ever get started and start like rolling dice. And I feel like that sort of tradition has lived on even to today.
Yeah, absolutely. Even I mean, to some extent, even every kind of new iteration, a new game, and they all have similar roots and inspirations. But it's like, well, hey, what if we use this dice differently? Or hey, what if you couldn't miss? Or actually, what if this one skipped all of the combat entirely? And uh, all the different iterations are, in a sense, I think, just kind of iterations of that core. Let's play pretend together and tell stories, that sort of core concept, and then expanding on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Which, I think could be a decent segue into our main topic,
Love it.
which is incentives, boons, and carrots on sticks.
All right.
So I brought up a few topics to discuss, and this was one of them that you said kind of stood out to you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and maybe I should explain a little bit what we mean by like boons or carrots on sticks, because to me, whenever I hear carrot on a stick, what I think of is actually like the carrot instead of the stick, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the incentive to do something instead of the, oh, what's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Like incentive instead of punishment. Right.
exactly. Yeah, you,
Yeah.
you nailed it. A reward rather than a punishment.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the a nice quote I always heard thrown around is, "What gets rewarded gets repeated." And I think that's so true in any role playing game, but especially ones where there are like XP incentives, right? Like we were talking about Blades in the Dark. Blades in the Dark is one of those games that has very specific XP based incentives built into the system. And so you definitely see players lean in and latch onto this concept by the way that they end up role playing their specific style of character, or their role, rather. I don't know if you've really looked much into it, but
Probably. I don't think I have examples from that system to draw from yet, but I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I think that's one of the best ways to design a mechanic for your game, custom or new system, or whatever it may be, is to sort of start from that place of, well, okay, well, what sort of gameplay do I want to encourage? What
right.
do I want people to be rewarded for? I was just talking about this the other day in the context of, this isn't really a mechanic necessarily, but just in the context of how you describe.
And it doesn't have to be a mechanic. That's just
Sure.
one example, but that's something I think we all sort of like learn to inject into our games, whether we're conscious of it or
Sure.
not.
Hmm.
But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. But even in the sense of like how you describe the world, if you describe a room to your party, um, I think that generally speaking, dungeon masters are a bit too stingy with information. I think we feel
Mm,
like we want to hide information behind some sort of check or some sort of investigation. Um, but
yeah,
if you want to, I look at it kind of the other way. I want my players to be inquisitive and to be rewarded for it. So oftentimes, the only thing that they need to do to learn something about a space is to kind of ask a question about it, or to
yeah,
really kind of look or gesture in that direction, and then they're going to get a bunch. They're going to get rewarded with information. They're not going to have to face a check for that, right? And that's because I want that carrot to be. I want you to engage with the world. If you engage with the world, you're going to get information back. You're going to learn about it, and it's going to be useful in some way.
yeah.
Um,
That's actually that's a lesson that I unfortunately had to learn the hard way. Had a lot of games where some part of the story was kind of locked behind a role, and
yes.
then without fail, every time nobody gets that role, or then you have to do the awkward thing where you're like, okay, does anyone else want to roll like an investigation? And then you're just kind of like, passing the baton around until somebody finally gets it. And
Yeah.
but no, you're absolutely right. Actually, I was reading, so I just picked up Into the Odd not too long ago,
Mhm.
and Chris McDowell, who wrote it, one of the three, I'm probably going to butcher this, but I think one of the three GM principles that he has is the very first one is give information freely,
Mhm.
which is just such a beautiful way to put it because, so much of the game is about what information the players have. And if you're locking things behind a roll, if you're just, holding your cards too close to your chest, then your players are going to either be confused and not know what to do, or, when you spring something on them, they might feel a little cheated.
Absolutely. It's it's kind of the I feel like the it's the DM equivalent of the player tendency to have a mysterious background that they want to be shrouded away from the other players,
Yeah.
and which is totally fine. But anytime I have a player that wants to do that at this point, I'm like, that's great, and I'll help you with that. But first, we have to make a plan where all of it gets revealed at some point. Like
Right. Yeah.
that plan could be, okay, we're going to break down your mystery into 4 or 5 different reveals, and we're going to plan to have one of those reveals happen every so often, maybe every session, like maybe that aggressively. Because the thing is, it's the same. I feel like it's the same trap, right? Because the
Mm,
player thinks, ooh, yeah, no, my character's so cool because they're so mysterious, but in reality, they're cool because of the things you know in your head, and
right.
until everybody else knows that same thing, it's just pretty much just a blank character to them. And I think, yeah, the Dungeon Master's version of that is the world is sort of blank unless we make it, something, put something there for people to grab onto.
Yeah. There's actually a similar principle to what you're saying in like writing, right? Like the idea that if it doesn't happen on the page, like, you're doing all this world building, maybe you write down like who this character is to you that you're about to put into your story. But if it doesn't have it on the page, it might as well have never been written down, right? Like
Right.
it's kind of the same concept. Like if it doesn't happen in play, no one knows why you're such a mysterious character from the Underdark with your pet panther and
Yeah,
your twin blades.
exactly.
Um, but yeah, it's I'm leading kind of into the information bit of this
Hmm.
topic, but it is really important to like like you were saying, if you want to create incentives, if you want to create boons, those carrots on a stick, like we were saying, then really the players have to be aware of your plans to some extent. Like you can't create an incentive without putting it on the table.
Absolutely. Yep. Um, yeah, it has to be. I don't know. Like, there's to some extent, I think for me, I guess I'll say, I don't know if this is true for every
Yeah,
table, but I think that there's a positive form of metagaming where I kind of
absolutely.
want my party to develop a sense of kind of how I run a game, kind of uh where they can trust certain elements and where they can have to sort of fill in the gaps. I think, and I think that just is you get a sense of that over time. The more that
Oh
you
yeah.
play together. But I think that can help a lot once they know. It sounds weird because it sounds it's like once they know what to expect, but not in the way that the game goes, but once they know that they can trust that their time won't be wasted, I guess.
Yeah.
That helps.
Yeah, no, that's a huge element of it too, right? Like, yeah, I really like how you put that because that's a part of like game mastering that doesn't get brought up a lot, but that sort of trust between the GM and the table, right? Like, if your players really know what gets you excited, where those incentives and boons and things are going to come from, then they're more likely to lean in. Or here, I'll give an example. I have this one player. I don't think he'll care if I name him. So Pat, one of my favorite things that he always does, and I can tell what he's doing. He always asks like a leading question to me. He'll always be
Mhm.
like, "So, you said that he's up in this tree, right? And he's just kind of hanging out on the limb. You said." And I'm always like, "Yep, yep." Well, if I use my illusion spell on the tree to kind of like make a face in the tree, would that be enough to sort of scare him and potentially make him fall off? And so I always know, like, okay, here comes a Pat moment where he's trying to do something clever that stretches a little bit outside the rules and the boundaries of how things should work. But he has that trust that he can ask these questions, and almost always I'm going to say yes because
Sure.
first off, that's just fun.
Of course.
Say yes more than you say no.
Yeah.
That's in my opinion, but
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, like that ability to know where you can kind of break the rules with your game master and what lines you can cross, or like even to an extent, like how they how I as a game master might reward a certain style of play, whereas like other game masters might not.
Well, and to some extent, those situations are always funny. Some your players in my game sometimes too. It sounds like because um, it's I always feel like to some extent they're making it hard. They're the ones that are going to make whatever they're trying to do harder on themselves because
Mm,
usually what they're asking becomes some combination of thing. When in reality, if they said, "Do you think I can scare that guy off the tree?" For us, it becomes like probably one check
yeah.
because we want the thing to happen, but they're like, okay, if this and then this and we layer and we combine it with this, it's like you're concocting your own like DC at this point. You're stringing together all of this, and then to some extent, I think that's part of the fun for players doing that. So obviously, yeah, yes, more often than no. But it is always funny because it could probably usually be boiled down and be made a lot simple if we cut to the chase and get to the cool part. But yeah,
Yeah, it always boils down to a dice roll anyway, right? You're like, all right, we're talking a lot about this. Let's just go ahead and roll the dice and see what happens.
exactly. Yeah. There's not some complex Euclidean math going on my side of the table. Let's just okay. I got a sense of the DC. Let's roll.
So to get into a little bit more specifics,
hmm
can you think of any ways in games you've run where like incentives or even like specific boons have really worked or shined for your table?
Yeah, I think the one that I've been happiest with so far because it had the most impact on the game as a whole was um there's basically a whole system of kind of building a guild that
Mm,
both brought in recruits as well as gave different benefits to the party members depending on how basically healthy and broad not broad or how healthy and how much growth the guild was seeing in different ways. So based on different quests that they took on and um, every person that they were recruiting brought different benefits to the guild that would give them more options and more reach. And that was because they wanted to be in a guild. That was their concept for the game, and I wanted them to play in such a way that they were sort of building up a guild and to be thinking about that and incentivized to act that way, I guess, as they met NPCs that they could recruit. I did sort of a thing where it kind of felt very very video gamey, but I think it's probably one of the better ways to do it, which was after an adventure, after an arc, where they whatever they were set out to do, a couple of the NPCs that they had run into would basically be sort of presented to them at the end of the adventure like, okay, you can recruit one of these people, right? Like you have enough
Mhm.
you can't have both, right? Which again is to a certain extent, everybody has to just sort of buy that premise because you go, well, wait a minute, why can't we recruit both? And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, we can lay out those specifics, but what I'm going to say is you can recruit one.
It's funny. I'll interrupt you just for a second to say,
Sure.
like, I don't know why in playing a tabletop role playing game we're so afraid to gamify things. Like we're
Yeah.
already playing a game. Why not
Yeah.
just say it? I don't know. I love when a mechanic is just because sometimes, and I think that's totally fine.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like I sort of it's a little bit more gamey than it is, but for some reason it feels more narratively satisfying too because we're not getting into the details and the weeds. We're sort of accepting that, from a storytelling perspective, it makes sense that you can kind of bring somebody with you, you know,
Yeah.
or uh, not really. So on the other side of it, kind of on the stick side, less the carrot side,
Yeah.
that my other group is sort of in its end game run up. They're sort of wrapping things up and heading towards sort of the big bad. And the way that we're approaching that is basically there are four players, and each of the players, somebody important to them has been captured by. It's ultimately by the big bad to keep them busy while a ritual is completed.
Mm.
So, okay, you can come and stop me now, or if you're true heroes, you have to go save all these people, right? So there's four kind of rescue missions spread out across the world. And when I revealed all of this to the party, I said, basically, if you guys ignore all of these captive NPCs that are being held by early campaign bosses, right? It's basically revisiting kind of a best of hits type of thing. If you ignore all of them and go face the big bad, they'll be weaker
Mm.
than they will be if you save one out of the four, they're still going to be just as weak. If you save two, also okay. If you save three out of the four, now it's going to be a 50-50. And if you save all four, then they're going to be in their ultimate form and it's going to be the hardest type
Mm.
of fight. And I gave that again, sort of, it feels more of a stick version of what we just described because I'm like, I'm not going to justify the timing here because they're all like 16th level anyway. Like I can't, there, if
Yeah.
I broke it down by real calendar days, they would just annihilate me. I have no doubt that they could sit down and go, okay, well, technically, if we get, okay, so
Yeah,
six
we
and a
we
half
use
hours
our
of rest.
teleport, and then we
Yeah.
can use tree walk every day or whatever it's called, tree step.
Hmm.
Yeah, totally.
And technically, and everything would get done in about 18 hours, and I'd be defeated. Instead, I just said, listen, the exact timing doesn't matter.
Yeah,
The point is, however long it takes, that's how long that the big bad needed, and we'll subtract accordingly. And that's been really great because again, the goal was they should be looking at these kind of rescue missions and weighing their options accordingly. That's what I wanted to happen, and it's great to have the players are probably more than half of the recipe with that sort of setup because they have to buy it. They have to buy in to the premise
yeah,
that this is what the game is, kind of like what you're saying, like it's a game, let's gamify it a bit. And if players are willing to
right,
do
right.
that, I mean, that's so much of our job done for us.
Yeah, I love too that you set up basically the Two-Face versus like Rachel situation, and
I know, right? Yeah.
the whichever Nolan Batman that was, but where he's got
Hmm.
to make the choice, and
The
neither
Dark
one
Knight.
is going to be
Yeah.
great. Yeah, Dark Knight. Yeah, no, that's a perfect example. I mean, carrot or stick, an incentive is an incentive, right?
Hmm.
It's I personally like when I can do a carrot, but not every situation is going to be a carrot. That's just you
Yeah.
know that's how it goes. But
True.
you know, it's I'm trying to think of even like an example that I have had in a recent game, but
I think I have another one too.
Okay, you go for yours, and then I'll think of mine while listening at the same time.
Sure, yeah. Uh, this is one of my favorite examples. I can't take credit for it because I think I ripped this one. I mean, just like everything's stolen and combined and
Yeah.
twisted together. The game is we're all just about borrowing the game,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So
File off the serial numbers and reuse it by all means.
this came from I need to find it and have this link ready because every time I try to reference it, I forget exactly where. But this was definitely from a Matt Colville live stream at some point, long before his most recent like game design or his book that he's working on. But I wanted to incentivize my group to push on more often, to take on more risk and stop long resting so often.
Yeah.
And his idea of it just makes it's one of those things where once I heard it, I'm like, I feel kind of silly for never thinking about that or never thinking of this, which is to provide benefits to the party once they have sort of gotten beyond a certain number of encounters in a day. Like, if you want the
Mm.
party to keep on fighting and to keep on pressing on, then create a list of boons that they get when they've had their third encounter or at their third encounter of the day or at their fourth encounter of the day, maybe also at their fifth. Like, you can create those and make them available to them so that they know, if we keep on going though, like all of a sudden my what's an example? Like my stealth or what's it called? What's the rogue stealth attack?
Oh,
Sneak
sneak
attack.
attack.
All of a sudden my sneak attack die go up, not in number, but from like a D6 to a D8. And
Mm.
they're like, "Ooh, I want to do that." Or the druid gets to transform at like a CR6, right? As long as
Yeah.
it's that third. And that has had a tremendous impact on that group's desire to keep going, right? They keep
That's
track of it way more than I do.
Oh man, that is really cool. Actually, I'm gonna definitely steal that because I'm gearing up for a Shadow Dark like West Marches style game,
Nice.
and I keep thinking in the back of my head like, how do I keep people just going? Like,
Yeah.
keep them pressing on without stopping to rest every hex, basically.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's really cool. There are some games it probably is easier to do that sort of thing in than others, but I really love this idea of like boosting character abilities or even maybe like giving them like an empowered version of an ability because they chose to press on to that next hex or encounter or that
Yep.
next room in the dungeon, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I
Yeah,
think
that's
that
really cool.
like I've only really done it the one way, but I think the next time I implement it, I think it'd be interesting to have a rotating set or even maybe something that they can swap out on a level up
Mm,
because I mean I can't even really remember all of them because I put them in place, made like a PDF, gave it to my party, and like I said, they keep track of it better than I do. They're like, ooh, but yeah, what number encounter is this? Like they all are tracking it as they go because they want those abilities. But some of them, I think get less exciting over time. But it's really not hard to think of ways to power characters up, right? Like
yeah.
that feels a little bit like an endless list. So it's like, okay, we could probably swap in different ones over time to keep it interesting. Kind of let them pick maybe not a whole bunch of things, but maybe swapping out one boon with another, almost like a sorcerer, swapping spells at each level up.
Yeah.
That could kind of work.
Man, I love that. You really got like my GM brain in full gear right now because now
Nice.
I'm even thinking like, there's so many games where you have like a meta currency, right? And I like the idea that maybe you start off with like one or nothing. I'm going to use like luck tokens from Shadow Dark, where
Mm-hmm.
usually you only get one luck token per character.
Yep.
But I could totally see a system where you're like, hey, you know what? Every hex that you press on or whatever, every encounter kind of thing, you get a bonus luck point that day. But
Mm.
when you stop, you go back to zero. The clock resets.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of like, you mentioned Matt Colville and Draw Steel, so this is kind of like a side plug for Draw Steel, but
Yeah.
I think that was one of the design goals when he was making that game is that like instead of sort of just running out of resources over time, he is incentivized through the game, continuing on, pressing on, and building your resources as you
Yeah,
keep playing, which is a really cool concept, by the way.
it is. Yeah, I'm really excited to see, you know, how how all of that how all of that turns out. I love the ideas that are guiding so much of what I hear about Draw Steel. I'm just so
Hmm.
curious to see what that final game ends up looking like when they get there, because I think that they're willing to change so much of it as they go that I've not done a great job of keeping up. I only know kind of the highlights about like, well, yeah, you don't miss, and kind of it's
Yeah,
geared
that's
towards
the thing everybody's saying, right?
movement.
Oh, you don't miss.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
Well, no, it's such a helpful. I don't even know. Like, I'm sure it's still part of the game. I know a lot of stuff has changed, but um, it's a helpful hook, whether they intended that to be the thing that stuck in people's minds or not, because that says so much about the intentionality of what they're trying to make. Um,
Mm.
like I like if I maybe this wouldn't work as a overall marketing thing. Maybe it actually would because it's the thing that so many people know. But if I was pitching the game to somebody, I would be like, okay, well, we could play lots of different games. Have you played Draw Steel? That's the game where you never miss, right? Like that's the tagline on the box to me. But because
Hey, there's your incentive right there.
because that tells you not only something interesting and unique about it, but also it's going to determine probably whether your players want it or not. Because some are
Yeah.
going to go, "Oh shit, really?" No, sorry. Can I curse on your podcast? I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I don't care.
Some players are going to be excited by that, and other players are going to be put off by that, and that could be really helpful to figure out right away, right?
Yeah.
So that you don't slot the wrong player into the wrong system.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing,
Mhm.
not to derail this topic, but like, yeah, there's just, Blades in the Dark is a perfect example.
Mhm.
There's some people that their brains are just really going to latch onto that system and they're going to go, oh, cool. It's like steampunk Peaky Blinders. I love it. And then there's other people that are just going to go, eh, not for me.
Right.
So,
Yep.
yeah, but, before we lose the whole,
Mhm.
we go down a totally different rabbit trail here. But yeah, and there are tons of ways to incentivize, certain styles of play, pressing on, like we were saying, things like that. One of them that came to mind was actually the torch mechanic that's in Shadow Dark. I know I keep plugging Shadow Dark like
No,
I don't
please.
know, bought out by them or whatever. But yeah, it's just that idea that like torch clocks run and we can't really stop it. When this thing burns out, something bad's going to happen, right?
Hmm.
Which is more of a stick than a carrot, but still, it's that if you really want to sort of like con pacing to your game, like we have 2 3 hours and that's it. Like that's such a great mechanic to keep people moving.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Well, and the clock, getting creative with a clock in general, in general, whether it's because I haven't played Shadow Dark, but I get the sense so it's a time based, based on what you're saying, right? There's a literal clock
Yeah,
being
yeah.
applied.
You pull out a torch and you say, "All right, you got an hour," or if you're playing in my game, you have 30 minutes. But
Gotcha.
and you don't really turn it off, even if you pause, for anything
Sure.
narrative or whatever. You're just like, it's going. When
This
you
is
run out, something
this
bad
is the clock.
happens.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I like that too. You could use that for like certainly using, like a D4 even in combat where it's like, okay, every X number of rounds, something's going to happen. That can
Yeah,
be a fun countdown, whether the party knows what that bad thing is or they're going to find out. It gives them something to sort of prepare for. I think it'd even be interesting to try. I've never tried this before, but it'd be interesting to use that sort of timer countdown mechanic, but base it on like dice rolls. So,
mm,
especially like an investigation, like, okay, we've got to almost trying to like, we've got to figure out the room is filling with sand. How do we escape?
yeah.
And there's no timer necessarily, but I just say basically after like 10 checks, the room is filled with sand.
Right. You plop an oversized D10 on the table and you just
Yeah.
start ticking it down. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, well, somebody says, okay, well, I'm going to look around. Can I find this? It's like, okay, then do a check, and they find some information. And we say, now that's one less. Now you've got nine. And that sort of lets them control the pace to an extent, but also gets them. Again, it comes back to that like positive metagaming where it's like it's always so tricky trying to introduce tension into what is a game that we're all comfortably sitting around playing with dice and friends. But what you're saying about a real life timer certainly does it. And I think doesn't Blades have it's like a pie based system, right?
Yeah, I was actually about to say we're basically talking about the clock system that's in Blades in the Dark, which that chapter, the whole book is worth that chapter, honestly. Like that, it's such a good tension sort of like driving mechanism, and really, I've just taken clocks and tried to plug them into so many other games at this point because it's such a good like visual to say like, okay, you know what? We're at the you guys are at a gala, right? And like your facade is sort of breaking every time you fail to convince one of the other nobles of why you're here or anything like that. It's it's cracking and they're seeing the stolen clothes or whatever you want to call it, but you just say I'm going to put an 8-point clock or whatever. You can literally just use a D8 like we said.
Yep.
And then you're like, when this runs out, the jig is up. They figured out that you're not real nobles. You're spies here to steal all their paintings or whatever it is,
Heck yeah.
But yeah. Blades in the Dark is awesome. Definitely read that chapter if this is for anyone out there who's listening, but yeah.
Please.
It's a great game.
Yeah.
Well, cool. We're actually kind of coming up on, I think, the 45-minute mark here. So
yeah,
we've been chatting away for a bit about some random things. I think I plugged Blades in the Dark and Shadow Dark like 6 times already. So I'm not sponsored.
Yeah,
but they're cool games. So, well, cool. Ryan, it's been so awesome to have you here. I've been a fan of the channel for a while.
Well, thank you.
Your crafting stuff is awesome, and people should check it out. So, go ahead and let them know where they can find you.
Yeah. You can find me my channel. It's Ryan Imel DM on YouTube. Like you said, a live stream there pretty much every day. Sometimes multiple times a day. Pretty much just whatever I happen to be working on. If it's a game prep, game design type of stream, then I'm doing that. It can also be crafting or painting. We do character design work and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, that's where I'll be. Thanks for having me. This was a fun chat.
Yeah, man. I want to do more of these. So if you ever want to come back, let me know. And yeah, everybody check him out because he's basically like the Bob Ross of D&D crafting.
I'll take
Just really, really chill streams. Awesome dude. You're going to enjoy it. Well, cool. This has been the Quantum Ogre Cast. We'll see you next time, no matter what choices you make. Running through a dungeon, you come across the junction. You gotta go left or right. It doesn't matter what you choose, 'cause either way you lose. There's a quantum ogre just out of sight. And now it's coming to a head, the very thing you dread. You get ready for the coming fight. Your spells are waning fast, you hit them with your blast. It's the last flickering light. Quantum Ogre Cast. Quantum Ogre Cast. Quantum Ogre Cast. Quantum Ogre Cast.